Prior to this, I have discussed about the identities and the subscriptions management. In this video, I will be talking about the Azure policies and the Azure RBAC. The learning objectives of this module are implementing the Azure policy, create Azure policies. I will demonstrate you that how to create the policy definitions and assign them and determine the compliance. Finally, the learning recap of this module. The Azure policies are required for the IT governance inside the Azure environment. For an instance, if you allocate the access to an administrator to create the virtual machines, then that administrator can create the virtual machines in any location of the Azure data centers or any size of virtual machine. Where you need some sort of compliance or restrictions to put in place as per your company's requirement or any particular regulatory body like ISO standards, NIST, UK officials, or the ISO standards. The Azure policy helps in enforcing the policies to meet these regulatory compliances. The Azure policy is a service that you can use to create, assign, and manage the policies. It does the evaluation and scans for the non-compliant resources and provides you the dashboard with the report on non-compliant resources, which you can later make them compliant to maintain the regulatory standards or organizational compliance. The advantages of Azure policies are the enforcement and the compliance. You can apply policies at scale, and that scale can be either the management groups where we have multiple subscriptions or can be the resource groups. We will see that in the upcoming slide. Remediation, we also can remediate the resources that are non-compliant. There are many use cases. There are hundreds of Azure policies that you will find as the built-in definitions inside Azure Policy Service. These can be like allow the resource type, resource size, which is referred as SKU as well, the stock keeping unit that you want to allow locations. These can be resource specific, services specific policies as well. For an instance, for a storage account, I want to put a policy in place that should ensure that the customers can bring their own keys for the encryption of data at rest. So it should be the customer managed key, CMK, instead of the Microsoft managed key. So such policies can be enforced in the Azure subscriptions. Talking about the process of working with these policies, first of all, we have to author the policies. That is known as policy definition, or definition type is policy, single policy. The policy defines the purpose. It has JSON script or code inside it, where all the if-then conditions and the requirement or required logics are placed. Then either you can assign one policy definition on the target resource, or you can put them into a logical group or container, which is known as policy initiative. So policy initiative is nothing but a container to put multiple policies together, which may be related to a particular regulatory compliance that you are going to follow, maybe ISO 27001, NIST UK official, HIPAA high trust, or maybe it's your organization's policy standards. So rather than assigning one policy at a time, you assign the policy initiatives. These initiatives you can allocate or assign at the management group, which is the topmost container where the subscriptions are created or managed. You also can have the granular control on subscription or maybe the resource groups inside the subscriptions. I have already talked about the management groups and the subscriptions management in the previous video. If you have not watched that video, then you can refer to the part 2 and part 1 of this learning path modules on managing the identities and the governance. Finally, SS compliance is done and it checks that whether the resources are compliant or not. There is a demonstration on assigning the policies, then creating and assigning an initiative definition, check for compliance, check for remediation tasks, remove your policies and the initiatives. Hello and welcome to this training video. On administer, all you need to do is you need to go to the Azure portal, which is portal.azure.com, and look for policies. Under policies, you have authoring blade. You can expand this authoring blade where you have the definitions. As I mentioned earlier, the definitions are of two types. Number one, initiatives, which are the containers of policies. You see, the initiatives have multiple policies within them. These can be the built-in policy initiatives, as you see, or you can create your own policy initiative by going to this button, initiative definition, and then add multiple policy definitions from here. Below you will see many policy definitions as well over here. So definition type is policy. So this is a single policy. And then we have the policy initiatives for particular regulatory standards like NIST or Center of Internet Security, CIS standards for those benchmarks to meet, Spain ENS, or you will see ISO standards, SOC 2, Type 2, or PCI DSS, HIPAA, High Trust, as I mentioned. So you will see many of the different types of initiatives already there. If you want to write your own definitions, then you have been given an option. You can create a policy definition and store it into a target container, be it a management group or the subscription. You can either write them from scratch or you can use a existing policy and then you can do the necessary changes to the logic of that policy. Or you can find the policies on the GitHub repositories. I'll be putting the link in the description of this video. Do visit that and you can use that repository to create the policy definitions from there as well. So there is a community that contributes to these definitions. Rather than writing everything from scratch, you can think of using it. We have a free search to search for the required policy, and we have the criterion filters for which scope, the subscription, definition type, what kind of definition, policy type, maybe I'm looking for all type of policies, or maybe I'm looking only for custom or built-in policies or static policies, so that I can use to filter these policies as per my requirement. For an instance, I want to use a policy called allowed location, and I want to enforce this policy on a target group. Allowed locations is a policy. I open this policy. You will see this policy in the JSON format where everything is in key value format and keys and values are strings. That is why you see the double quotes. Everything is wrapped in the curly braces as in the JSON it is wrapped with. And then you have the different attributes. There is complete structure of the policies that you have to refer to and follow while creating them. This is if-then condition through which this policy has been defined. The condition says that if the policy, the resource you're creating is the location not in. So not in is the operator. Then not in the parameter list of allowed locations. So if the resource you're deploying is not being deployed to the allowed locations, then the effect is denied. So your request will be failed. That's what the purpose of the policy is. Then you can click on assign policy to assign this. You can also make a duplicate of it and make changes to this template. Here when you assign it, so you can choose a management group. If I put it at tenant root group, it will be applicable the entire tenant wide on all the subscriptions, or I can be granular as per my requirement. I also can choose the subscriptions or a particular resource group out of those subscriptions. So for an instance, I want to put a policy here in my MSDN platform subscription, or maybe MSDN platform subscription. The resource group on which I want to put it is, let's say, this FD, and then I click select. Here are the parameters that I have to provide. The scope is there, exclusions, if any policy assignments to be excluded, and resource selectors, basic settings, version of the policy that I'm going to use, the name for this, you can provide a name, then detailed description for this, why are you applying it, for others reference, then policy enforcement, you want this policy to be enforced. Then this is the array as per the JSON file that you need to choose the regions where you want to do the deployment. So for an instance, I allow East US. It is an array, so I could have selected more than one. Then I can go for the remediation related policies as well. After that, non-compliance message, if I want to provide that the resources are non-compliant, so there should be a message provided to the user, I can do that. It takes 5 to 10 minutes to apply that policy. It will be effective within 5 to 10 minutes. And to validate this, all I can do is I can start creating some resource. And this resource I try to deploy, let's say this network security group. I want to deploy the network security group in that target resource group where there is a policy. So I click create. Publisher is Microsoft for this service. In the marketplace I have selected. This was my MSDN subscription. So this is the subscription. The resource group where I put that policy is this Central India, and then I'm putting it for test. You will notice that the validation for this resource deployment will fail. So if I go with review and create this, so validation has failed. Why has it been failed? Because of the policy. Central India is not allowed. You can check the policy details which is restricting from doing that. If I choose East US, that will be absolutely fine, and I'll be able to create this resource. Running the final validation, and all my parameters and policies are fine with that, I can deploy this resource. Well, this is how I can create and assign a policy. Coming back to the policy service, we have policy initiatives we have also seen. So I can go to the definitions, and therefrom I can create the initiative, or I already have few initiatives where I have added few policies already. So I can pick one of the initiative. For an instance, Infi test. This is one of the initiative having these policies in place: allowed location, not allowed resource type, and so and so. And then I can assign this initiative on the target resource. So the same thing is to be followed, but these policies may have some parameters to be specified during the assignment. So you need to complete those parameters and you complete this assignment. So as you see here, the list of the parameters, the policy has no parameters right now, and then provide the details and then review and create it and assign it on a target resource. Well, this is my MSDN subscription. The scope is quite vast. So instead of going for that, I'll pick a particular resource group where I want to apply it, and then I will review and create and apply an initiative.